about to be live. We are live. Hi,
Yes.
everyone. I hope you're doing well and that you're having a wonderful day, whatever time zone of the day it is. I'm Colombe, and this is Andrea, and we are the co-founders of Atlas and the people behind this weekly live that happens on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And tomorrow we'll put out a longer piece of content on the history of nations on YouTube that we'll share.
So very happy to be here. And today's topic is very exciting and is about borders, walls, passports, and all these constructs that divide and section the way human society works. And we're gonna deep dive in the history and explain what we think, how we think the world should evolve from where we are now. But just before we go into that, let's present ourselves and say what we're doing.
I think I just introduced us, so I can just talk about what we're doing. So as I mentioned, we're the co-founders of Atlas. Atlas is a global movement, so we have thousands of members in over 130 countries that work to unite people across borders. And what I mean by this is there are a lot of issues and opportunities that exist, like climate, like fiscal justice, but also like new tech, that are global in nature. If one country alone tackles them, it doesn't work. If one country alone tries to create a new opportunity out of it, it doesn't work. So we have no choice but to work together, but we're not actually doing it because of the current system we live in, because countries put their interests first, because the existing global order puts countries first, and as a result, national interests first. So at Atlas, we believe that we need to change the way the world works. And I know it's a big topic, and it sounds insurmountable. It sounds like a mountain that you'll never see the top of when you're climbing. But we actually have a plan. And I think it's a pretty good plan because we've been working on it for years now. We volunteers, we've been thinking about it, iterating, making so many mistakes, sometimes getting a few things right, which basically involve three things. So we want to create a democratic system of governance that is global. So this means something like a global democratic country or a global democratic federation, and where people have a say on how they are governed, what topics governs them, and so on. To do that, since it's about changing the world order, we'll start by listening to people. So starting in January, we'll launch global consultations where people will be able to discuss the key issues they're facing, how they can be solved at global level, why, when, etc. We'll vote on it and adopt it. Then in 2025 and 2026, the UN will select its chief, not elect, select. Very good timing. Not elect, but select in a non-democratic manner. And we'll use this as a tool and as a moment to push forward the vision we'll have worked on with hundreds of thousands of people, hopefully, from all across the world. The way we'll do it is we'll run global primaries. So we'll treat this as an election, even though the UN doesn't. We'll run a global primary and we'll send a candidate forward with our vision to actually push it forward.
Yeah.
And finally, when we refuse because of veto by Russia, China, and others, and we'll start building those institutions, because who said that the people of the world cannot build global governance themselves?
Very well said, Colombe. Very well said.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So based on what everything Colombe said, we're doing these lives and these broadcasts to basically showcase what we're doing and explore ideas with all of you, and ensuring that we receive feedback, ideas as we go. And this week, the topic is the history of nations. We started 2 days ago and yesterday discussing about how nations came about and what's the role of nations. And today we wanted to focus on a particular aspect of nation states, which is border control, passport, agreement between countries on how they monitor their borders, which seemed like a small aspect of a nation state, but actually is what would define a lot of our life, because where we are born and where we live completely change the course of our life. And the fact that borders prevent us from moving, prevent us from resettle, prevent us to grab opportunities outside of where we live, makes the whole system of nation states very, very defining of our lives as humans. And since I don't know you, but I never subscribe to the system, and I do not agree with many of the aspects, I think it's very important to understand why borders are like this right now, and what we can do to change them. And as every week, before jumping into the history of borders and what we want to change of them, we're going to start with looking at current news to anchor our topic in what's going on around us. And I selected 3 news, and Colombe is not aware of them, as usual. Like one of us prepared the episode, and the other one is here to challenge it.
Otherwise, it would be so boring.
Exactly. And we found 3. I found 3. I mean, there are so many news about borders because obviously migration is borders. Many other topics are related to borders. I chose 3. The first one is about Italy, the country I'm from. Recently, Italy is at a changing government, and for the first time since the Second World War, a very far-right government is in charge of Italian policies. If you know about the Second World War, you will know that Italy was actually dominated by a far-right regime, and since then, Italians been very careful not to elect a second one. But this time, it didn't work out.
Although, if I may, Salvini, who was elected before, I mean, maybe compared to the crazy one right now, didn't seem so far right, but was pretty far right still, right? It was migrants out and so on and so forth. It was a pretty hateful narrative that for me completely was far right. The only difference is she's right now, and the prime minister is right now from a party that was actually created by Mussolini, right?
By basically people that were fascists, and then they changed name, and then they changed name again.
But it's still the same party, right?
It's still very similar. But the difference with Salvini. So, I mean, this Italian party is not interesting for many people, but it's the first time the biggest party in Italy is far right, because Salvini wasn't the biggest party in Italy. But I agree with you. I think the policies were very similar in the last 5 years. But now, let's say there is a fully far right government. The biggest party is with this characterization, and so also the policy they can enact are from that side of the spectrum. And for the first time since the new government came about, so roughly a month and a half ago, some boats of migrants or boats rescuing migrants came in front of Italian shores after saving lives in the Mediterranean. If you're from other parts of the world, you might not know that it's many years now that a lot of migrants are attempting to cross the Mediterranean from Northern Africa to the shores of Italy, Spain, sometimes Greece, and as a consequence, and also because of the inability of the European Union to provide assistance and support, the Mediterranean Sea is basically a graveyard. I don't remember the exact numbers, but Colombe might know better than me of people that died.
It's thousands every single year. So I can Google it up. I think already this year is more than 5,000 people who died. I think just to clarify this, it's here we're seeing, I mean, I'm going into, I guess, your topic directly.
Yeah.
But we're seeing how borders and nationalism, whether it's at the national level or even at the European level, create death and so on. So we see completely human-made situations. So in 2015, the European Union tried to create a narrative that was, we have a refugee crisis. We never had a refugee crisis. We had a political crisis that was a complete inability to deal in a human and fair manner with migration flows.
Exactly.
The amount of refugees coming and of migrants coming was superior to previous years, but it wasn't a crisis. It was like 0.3% of the European population overall that is made of it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And however, the EU decided to find an external enemy to focus on. A lot of countries decided to find an external enemy to focus on instead of internal problems. And as a result, focus on migration as a crisis. The real crisis for me was 2 things. One, it was the inability to cooperate across borders within the EU and outside of the EU. Yeah. What I mean is we left a few countries such as Italy, Greece, and Spain, as you said, to deal alone with the influx of people. And however, we live in the European Union, in a continent where you're supposed to show solidarity. So either you support through financial means and by enabling people to relocate to other countries where there are more spaces and so on and so forth, which we didn't do. No. We completely isolated people. I remember the French president Emmanuel Macron being super quick to point fingers at Italy and saying like, oh, they're acting in an inhuman manner, they're pushing back boats, inhuman, insane. We closed our ports years before and didn't accept anyone. And the second thing is the inability to collaborate and work together outside of the European Union, between European countries and home countries of migrants and refugees, and countries where people pass by, so transition countries.
Yeah.
Instead of actually opening legal migration routes, humanitarian corridors, ensuring that people fleeing for their lives have a safe way of accessing a safe haven, we decided to basically militarize the Mediterranean, give money to countries that have been proven to torture migrants, push people back to those countries where we know they will face torture, and just close our eyes and be like, yeah, well, we better, we treat people well.
Absolutely.
And so we see how, for me, overall, since before 2015, but I started reading more about it in 2015, so that's the memory I have, and a complete failure that for me reminds me of the Second World War, when boats of Jewish refugees were leaving Europe. I remember the St. Louis leaving from Belgium and trying to reach the US, being turned away, going through Cuba, going back, and ending up back in Europe, where 70% of the St. Louis, I think, ended up in Auschwitz.
Yeah.
We see exactly the same thing. We literally saying, our lives matter more. We're not even going to host people. No, too bad. And Italy's now things are, and then I'm done with my tirade, but this pisses me off.
But it's exactly what we want to get. Yeah.
Like, it's a topic that really, I mean, it's hypocrisy 101. We're pretending we have solidarity, we're pretending we have human values and so on. Just go in any European countries and look at the infrastructure. I live in the UK, I'm French. When I pass through Calais, which the Eurostar goes through, you see literally like 5 rows of barbed wires to keep people out. You feel like you're in the middle of a war zone when it's human beings that are literally trying to find a safe haven. And instead of assisting them, we're criminalizing them, we're putting their lives in danger, and so on. And Italy right now, by breaching its international legal obligations, discriminating between who's worthy of being vulnerable.
We still didn't disclose this.
Sorry. I'll stop on my trade. I'm pissed.
No, I think Colombe 88 is complete to the point. It's exactly what we're discussing. I just want to give a bit of context for people that didn't follow the Italian
I can continue. I can go on France, the UK, anything you want after.
So discussing about Italy. So Colombe also mentioned it a couple of governments ago. There was another kind of far-right approach to the migrant situation. And basically what happened back then is that boats were highly encouraged also with obviously legal means to dock at other ports, so not in Italy. What changed now with the new government?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So, for example, back then the Interior Minister, Salvini, the far-right leader, was asking very, very aggressively the EU and Malta, for example, to host boats, rescue boats instead of sending them away. What changed now is that instead there is a new strategy. So in the last few days, 2 boats reached the shores of Italy, Sicily, if I'm not mistaken, so the southern island. And what happened there is that women, children, and in general, vulnerable people, so sick people, were allowed to disembark. But basically, male adults were forced to stay on the boats. So the new approach, and I read an analysis of this, that the Italian government is trying to take is basically appeasing the European Union to say we're taking care of the vulnerables, while appeasing far-right voters and say we are turning back adults, healthy adults. And first of all, there is no place to turn them back. And that's the first thing to understand. People are fleeing conflict, famine, looking for better opportunities, but going back to, for example, Libya is an incredible risk for these people, a death sentence. So first of all, there is no place to turn them back. Second, and what happened while this situation was
it's illegal to
it's
turn them back.
It's completely illegal from any international law. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
You can't turn back refugees, and you don't discriminate based on age or gender. It's not because you have women or children. Men are just as, it's not about deserving anyhow, have just the same right to access protection. It's not, you don't say, oh, you're a woman, yeah, come in, you're a man. No, it doesn't work this way. If you're a refugee, if you have an asylum claim, if you arrive in such a situation, you have a right and you cannot be returned. It's the law against refoulement. You cannot be returned on the international law. It is insane to do this. And just to jump on one thing, to put also the focus on the boats themselves. Those boats, I think this one is Humanity 1 or something like this.
One of them is that.
Yeah, there's a lot now waiting to dock. Those boats are doing the job that government should be doing. So they are incredible. Those are heroes operating those boats that are actually saving human lives. Yeah. Again, governments are failing. They are not putting in place safe humanitarian corridors. People will never stop migrating when they're fleeing and when they have no choice, but they will take more dangerous routes if you don't have safe ones.
Absolutely.
Governments are failing. They're militarizing the Mediterranean, and as a result, people are taking even riskier routes. And then they're not even saving them, which you have to do when you have someone literally drowning next to you. You have to save them. And so humanitarian organizations are literally operating those boats. People are living on those boats, operating them, raising money for them. By the way, go and donate to those boats, raising money for them and saving people every single day. And then it's extremely difficult for them to be able to actually finish to save them and bring people to a safe haven. And as a result, right now, some of the boats have less, I think migrants, by the way, were finally allowed to disembark.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to get there.
Yeah, but as a general thing, have less, you stay on a boat without healthy sanitation, without enough food, and so on and so forth. And the management of those boats has become incredibly difficult because countries are basically trying to stop them from operating.
Yeah.
So funding and so on is more and more difficult. This pisses me off so much.
So just to close the story, at the end, people were allowed to disembark after many days, which meant that not only all the far-right rhetoric was completely useless, but basically because massive suffering, because a lot of these people got a fever, other infections, mental health struggle, and at the end, they are on the ground as well. So let's not, I would say...
and the boat could not rescue other people in the meanwhile because it was stuck.
Yeah. And also, like, in international pricing, like, horrible, like, I'm ashamed of being Italian when this thing happened. But then it's just one of the news about migration. Second, the sad part is that all these news are negative, so we'll go mad about this news. The second one is related to the United Kingdom, where both Colombe and I currently live, and a country with a very, very bad migration track record. There have been policies of trying to redirect migrants to Rwanda.
Usually they pay more money than they would spend in welcoming people to send them to a country with horrible human rights abuses, a track record of people getting abused, getting killed for standing up as an opposition leader, where you don't have freedom of association, of expression, and so on. It is not safe. You cannot send people to a country that is not safe.
Exactly.
Even a UK government official said, I think it was like the ambassador or whatever, said before they put in place this dumbass policy, do not do it. It's illegal. You cannot do it. It's bad.
Fully agree. But that's not the news we are covering today. There's a more recent...
If you mention any of this, I'm going to go on this.
There's a more recent scandal. There's about the Manston Asylum Center. Basically, in a few words, there was another asylum center that was supposed to host, 2,000 or 3,000 people. Actually, we're hosting 10 times more. I'm seeing random numbers. I don't have the exact numbers, but you can find them in the article. Basically, overflowing with people, horrible conditions, super long waiting times where people were only supposed to pass there for, and stay there for identifications. Sorry?
For a couple of hours.
Yeah, for a couple of hours. So this just showing that even the fifth biggest economy on this planet, a very rich country, wealthy countries, because of nationalistic policies, because of racist approach to this problem, is basically infringing on every basic human rights that they are struggle to defend elsewhere. So that's very embarrassing.
So, by the way, the asylum center is supposed to host max 1,600 people for 24 hours at a time. So it's a processing thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were housing about 4,000 people for weeks on end.
Crazy. So you can imagine the condition. So this is another problem related to borders. But before Colombe jumps into this topic, I want to open also the next one.
So we're not criticizing the UK because the second gone for a long time.
Exactly. But I think you can criticize the UK and the US together in the next one.
Well, I mean,
the next news is actually not a new news, but it's a recurring problem that the US has. Is how they are dealing with their Mexican border. And obviously we can cite countless statements of Trump and horrible policies put in place. But I think one really stuck with me is it happened in September 2021. It's about those pictures and videos of border guards whipping migrants.
But wasn't that in Haiti?
No, this was in Mexico-US border. Maybe also Haiti, I'm not sure. Okay. But the one I'm referring to.
I know that was
Haiti migrants at the border. Yeah. Now I understand what you mean. And for me, that was one of the saddest things I've ever seen, probably in related to modern history for a developed, highly wealthy and peaceful country. I've never seen something like this. I think that obviously there have been an outrage, and I'm sure that some policies have been changed, but it was incredibly sad, and as a human being, I couldn't watch his images. What do you think about this one?
Between the UK, so just to go back, where you literally had pregnant women in horrible situations, this where people get whipped for trying to get to, again, a safe haven, people that are fleeing for their lives. You do not leave your country, you do not leave everything you have, you do not leave everything behind, knowing you'll take the most dangerous journey of your life if you don't have to, if you face no other choice. You just don't do it. It's not like you just one day, oh, today I'm going to make it to the US, let's go. You literally have to risk your entire life, livelihood, family, and so on. And then we treat people worse than animals. Literally, we treat them worse than the worst criminals. We leave them in completely overcrowded detention centers. We hit them, and so on and so forth. It's insane. And for me, this is exactly why countries are wrong, nations are wrong, and borders are wrong. We are all humans. We share one planet. We share resources. We're supposed to share a basic thing that is called humanity, whereby by certain values, we consider that our lives and each other's lives are important, that we should treat each other fairly, kindly. That's what you learn in kindergarten, be kind. Treat each other kindly, whereby we learn that no one else is more important than anyone else, that we all equal and so on. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Then we say that certain lives are worth savings. Again, we see it with Ukraine. Ukrainian, we pay way more attention. Again, I'm happy we do. We should pay attention to Ukraine. But they are whites, so in Europe, we pay more attention. People dying in the Mediterranean every single day, no one gives a shit. It's not even covered anymore. People living in detention camps in the UK, being whipped in the US and so on, it makes the news for one day, and then that's it. For me, it's the same topic than poverty or than anything else. We live in a world where humanity is supposed to define us. But because of some random ass-made divisions, whether they be borders or on poverty or other things, we consider that, certain things are just not fundamental, like being able to survive.
That's exactly what we were talking about. And I think these are just some news that I found today in a quick research, but I'm sure that people over the planet know about a lot of scandals on every continent. It's not something that we are dealing with as humanity in a decent way.
No, you see it across all continents. I remember seeing, I think it was in South Africa, migrants being treated in a hyper-racist manner, migrants from neighboring countries. You see it in every single continent. In Bangladesh was praised for welcoming Burmese refugees during the Rohingya genocide, and still now there are huge Rohingya camps at the border and so on, and yet now they want to return them. It lasted, they were kind for a few months. It's not like you're showing kindness for a few months. It's your basic human duty. You don't let your other human beings die. That's not a thing. You support one another. You stand together. We are, the fact that you're from Bangladesh or from Burma, the fact that you're from the UK or from Somalia or whatever, we literally share the same planet. Those administrative divisions mean nothing. They were created, borders, as we're going to talk about, recently created, they mean nothing. They should not define life or death.
Fully agree. I think this is the perfect way to say it.
You're just pissing me off. That's what it's getting at. The news episode.
The news. So, as I said, this is a limited coverage of news. Now, let's jump into the historical background of borders. Why do borders exist? Well, first of all, this is something that I learned probably a couple of years ago. I didn't know before. Borders are very new.
You read this in Sapiens, right?
Yeah, I read this in Sapiens, I think. So borders are very new. And we're going to go through now the chronological history of borders. But basically, it's something that for most of human history, we did not know. And we did not want, and we did not believe into.
What do you mean we didn't believe into? It's just that no one thought about it, no?
No one thought about it. No one cared if people were crossing a line. And I look at some historical examples, because obviously we know the Great Wall, we know the Hadrian's Wall in the United States.
Those were defensive.
Exactly. Those were defensive line, which means that, for example, the Hadrian walls in the United Kingdom or in Great Britain, built by the Roman Empire, was not did not delimit anything. Non-Roman citizens, a Scottish farmer could cross it anytime. There was no check, there was no request to stop. It was only to either protect a territory, but most of all actually to project superiority. So the Great Wall in China was definitely a defensive mechanism, but it showed the power of the emperor. And this was the case in many situations across the planet.
And then you think of Trump trying to project empire with his shitty wall that they could never actually.
Don't spoil me. I
didn't read your paper. I don't know what you're going to be talking
You're
about.
spoiling.
You're just making
But
me.
it's a good example. It's a very good example. And so basically, throughout ancient history, city-states, empires, countries, nations had kind of a sense of where their territory was, but there was no hard border. People could cross. The only hard borders were to project military power, to protect certain areas, or even to project power within the country. So, for example, when there were fortresses with big walls, was to say, I'm the ruler of this place. So it was a completely different understanding of borders and walls. This started to change in 16 and 1700. And actually here, something that we mentioned yesterday as not very useful to define nation state, the Peace of Westphalia, is more useful to understand the value, the changing understanding.
The peace or the treaty?
It's the Peace of Westphalia that gave way to the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. It's the first time where it was codified on a piece of paper, an international treaty, that our countries, nations, empire had exclusive sovereignty on a defined territory, which means lines were drawn for the first time. So France was actually exactly this, Spain was exactly this.
And that was 1648.
1648 is the time where we romanticize about the creation of borders and lines. That for me is a very sad news, but back in the days was a big change in international relationship. And absolute sovereignty on a territory was declared, which means even farmers and ships could not cross that border. Obviously, technological advances did not allow for this kind of monitoring and control. But that was the idea. If you were French, you could stay in France. If you were Spanish, you could not come to France.
So did they invent passports in 1648?
Not yet. So that was just...
So how did you know?
They didn't know. It was a theoretical approach to borders and
sovereignty. Who created this, by the way?
All powerful people in Europe, basically, at that time. Okay. Very sad. Then, real borders, the creation of real borders and passports dates back to the First World War. Why? Two reasons, or around that age. For two reasons: one, war. So the First World War was such a big traumatic experience for humankind, where millions of lives were lost for small territorial gains. They kind of gave away in the public discourse and the public imagination of the need for hard borders and defined borders. Sorry,
why?
Because basically, because of what happened, people started to say, okay, we need to actually understand, to maintain peace, to ensure that this doesn't happen again, who owns what, and ensure that only those people own that. So
to ensure peace, you create divisions.
Exactly.
To ensure peace, you make sure people don't identify with anything in common.
Exactly. Actually, I read that was one of the principles created by Woodrow Wilson, so the President of the United States, basically in the Paris Peace Conference in 1990. So the idea that you need clearly recognizable lines of nationality. Very weird. And passports came around the same time. So basically, this is the time where we start having real borders. I want to mention something else, because now we're talking about kind of like self-designed borders and not imposed. There's obviously a massive difference with what happened in Africa and other colonial territories, where borders were drawn and created by imperial powers without any interest of where these lines were falling, just to basically divide resources and areas of interest. Interestingly enough, the division of modern Africa was basically decided in 1884 in a Berlin ballroom. I read the anecdote. Basically, a map was put on a wall, and leaders of different nations started drawing lines and decided how to divide Africa.
Okay, so when were borders created at first? It's 1990?
Yeah.
1919 at the Paris Peace Conference?
Yeah. So these were.
But didn't you already have some? Because before that, some regions of France, for example, and Germany were being fought over and passed between one and the other one and so on. So you had maps already with lines.
For sure, there were lines, there were maps all the time. But basically, there was not a strong sense that you could not go the other way. It was for armies, for taxation, but it was a free flow of people.
So it was like an admin division.
Yeah, and obviously on certain territory, there was historical fighting, like the one between France and Germany. But for many other territories, no one cared.
But so what you mean, it was more like admin division, like X ruler has the power to levy taxes in this place, but it's not like, ooh, I can cross over and go and see my mom in the city on the other side.
Exactly. Also because historically borders were more
natural, right?
Were natural or related to people. You know, like rules were like, I can levy taxes on these villages and these group of people that define themselves as their assassins. But it wasn't about exactly where the line was.
And normally it's more when you have also like big rivers or seas or mountains and so on, so that normally we would have less crossing, I guess.
Exactly. Anyway, this a brief history of borders, and as I said, I'm not an historian. I did this quickly, but it's very interesting to see how basically borders are a modern invention, and they came out of technology. So the ability to communicate, track people, verify where the lines are, and wars. And I don't know which one came first, but definitely is a 100-year-old invention.
Can you recap in 2 seconds why we're talking about borders?
We're talking about borders because we're talking about the history of nations, and
but why is that relevant? Why are we talking about it? Like, I mean, why for global governance do we care?
Because borders are the source of countless problems, are the source of wars, are the source of human suffering, as we discussed before with migration and pushing away migrants, and are also what we've grown accustomed to but we did not sign up for. We basically grew up in a territory, and we are defined by the territory because we are grew up geographically within a certain line, and this completely affects our life, change our possibilities and our opportunities in life. But I did not sign up for that. I don't know you, Colombe, but I don't think many people signed up for that.
So I don't know if it's a good transition then, because I don't know what you have planned after, but can I speak 2 seconds about how passports basically enable,
of course,
the world order to create a second-class type of citizen? I don't know if you...
It actually comes soon, but yeah, we can also talk about it now.
Right, so go about it. I'll talk about it later.
The only thing I wanted to add to the historical outlook is today. So as I said before, just to recap, because we talk about many different topics, borders came around 100 years ago when technology allowed basically for monitoring borders, for communication across big territories, and because of massive world wars created the need to define clearly borders to maintain peace, but actually it did not maintain any peace, but this was the idea. What happened in recent history? I isolated three very, I think for me, interesting facts. One is the escalation of borders. Many historians basically link the attack to the Twin Towers, so in 2011, to the start of a new era of hyper protectionism and hyper escalation of borders, as I said before. And this because basically, while in the years before, borders were only hard when there was, I don't know, a conflict between two countries, and obviously it's more rare nowadays. And for example, between Canada and the US, you didn't have to show a passport. After 9/11, the change in public discourse, the change in countries' discourse switched as change. And so from there, countries felt the need to build more borders, to check who was coming in, to discriminate against certain parts of the world population. And so we have a new phase of recreation of very hard borders. They led to today, I think, according to these articles I read, is the moment with the maximum amount of control of borders in the history of humankind, as we are today. And this is also obviously very linked to mass surveillance and technology. Why? Because right now, and since a few years now, countries can basically monitor whoever is coming into the borders and whoever is leaving. There's something that before it was completely impossible to track. And this means that countries, even in where there is no threat or where there is no need, they feel inclined to do so, for future, for maybe statistical purpose, for security, for anything possible. So we are extremely controlled in the way we enter and leave countries. And this has enabled a lot of mass surveillance and passport discrimination. This is a topic that Colombe is gonna open right now. I just want to add something that I read that was very interesting. There is an historian that in 2010 predicted that we would soon see a period of creation of walls. So basically, what Trump did just a few years after. And
that's high spoiled, that's right.
Exactly. And basically, the creation of walls for this person was a symbol of waning powers of nations, because they need to project this control to their citizens and this ability to build big walls and so on in an era where people fly, data are everywhere and so on. It shows how states are actually losing the battle of sovereignty, and they're not able to control the territories anymore. But Colombe.
No, I was just going to say, so we talked about, if I'm trying to recap the conversation, because again, what we do is Andrea prepares one day and I prepare the other day. Otherwise, it's very boring to speak for an hour when you already know what you're going to be speaking about. And you've already done the research. And so I didn't prepare today, but it's a topic I think a lot. I used to work on refugees' rights. So borders is a topic I thought a lot about in different ways. So today we spoke about borders in the sense of how they create conflicts, how they create death when we look at migration, and how they create divisions that lead to more tensions in the world, right? Am I missing anything?
No.
And how they're new inventions, so it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think something we didn't talk about is, and maybe then we should also try to consider for a second whether there's anything useful about them, because we destroy them. Something we didn't talk about is how, we're talking about passports, because passports is often how you feel, what enables you to cross a border, right? Or the lack of passport, or the specific passport, what doesn't. And I think something we didn't talk about is the completely discriminatory aspect of borders. So obviously it's discriminatory, just like countries, because it's to the exclusion of others.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a concept that is super weird, right? Like, I'm French, you're not, so we are and you are not. It's a weird concept. Like, why? It's super, makes no sense to me. But I think passports even more, because you see that based on the passport you hold, well, one, based on your nationality, you will have certain rights and certain obligations or not. So, for example, if you're North Korean, you won't be able to go anywhere or do anything, and you'll be completely at the mercy of a state that will put you in concentration camps if you dissent or anything. Versus in other countries, like I am again in the United Kingdom, you will have more rights and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Weird as hell. That my life is determined where I'm born and within what borders I live in. However, I think passports is even weirder in a way. Not only because it replicates those issues, but because the type of passport you hold will have a massive difference on your life. So consider the fact, again, I have a French passport, you have an Italian passport. We have to travel quite a bit for work next year. I have a conference I have to go to in the US. And it's with a lot of young people that think about global issues. And so I was put in this chat, a WhatsApp chat about visa applications. And for me, I was like, why am I putting this? And I didn't think about it for a second, but because I'm French, for me, a visa in the US, on the long term is an issue, but to visit the US is not an issue. I can apply for what is called the NISTA, which is basically a waiver program, super fast, get it, and just go. Yeah. I don't have to provide additional documentation. I don't have to go to the embassy. I don't have to do any of this. I can just go for 90 days to the US. And I was like, for me, it's so easy. And then I was just reading the chat, and people were like, yeah, we need all of those supporting documents, interviews at the embassy, and so on. And I was like, here, there are clearly a few different classes of citizens. There's American citizens and residents that are class number one. Then there's people that are acceptable to the US to travel there, that have waiver programs for their visas, like myself. And then there are the others that clearly need to be looked at a bit more based on their countries.
So sad.
It's so weird. It's such a weird concept. This identity document means that me versus someone else, it will make it easier to travel. And don't get me wrong, I'm very, very, very happy that it's easy for me to travel. Again, I'm not saying that make it harder for me. I'm saying why the hell such a document creates second-class citizens? So, world citizens, It's super weird. And then you can go even further down the drain, but it's a whole other debate. If you look at Palestine and Israel, with Palestinians having a lack of access, or people that are stateless, and that don't have those documents and can't even travel. Anyhow, it's a whole other rabbit hole.
No, but that's the rabbit hole we're into. The truth is that because of modern technology, instead of opening up more countries and being more trustworthy and welcoming people, the opposite is happening. And obviously it's a political issue, but it's a big technological issue. It's because now basically countries, even without the diplomatic weight of letting people in or out, there are countries that do not trust. There are certain countries will perform background checks or have reliable passports technology, and as such, these countries will not be ever. The citizens of this country will not have access easily to other countries.
And I think there's just the fact that there are countries that are racist as hell. So you see Trump that puts on a black red list. I don't know what it was called, like some random countries because of what he considered to be terrorism threats. So anyone coming from like, I think it was Somalia, I don't even remember, was like, couldn't access the US or like Yemen or whatever countries where you actually need to make it easier for people to leave because of there's huge refugees movements, you have famines, you have wars and so on and so forth. And that's just pure racism.
Yeah, I fully agree. So what I want to say is we're in this situation. So what is the case for open borders? Because there are actually many people advocating for open borders. And it's not only us.
Sorry, just one thing. I just want to read a comment. Well, I don't fully agree. I find it interesting.
Go for it.
From Kay Woodworth, 19, who said, borders and fabricated wars serve the purpose of the deep state principles of division and confusion. What I find very interesting here is, so thanks, Carrie, for this, is for me, it's often, I don't know if it's borders necessarily, but this external enemy you find outside of your borders. So it could be migrants, it could be for Russia, Ukraine, it could be whatever, a way of looking away from internal problems that you're facing. And it's something I mentioned yesterday a lot. It's whenever you have populists, wannabe dictators, or whatever in power that are facing national issues, such as a recession, a pandemic, whatever, they tend to, and suddenly their popularity kind of goes down, or you start having a bit of trouble at home. They're like, ooh, let's look outside. Who are we going to hate this time? Yeah. So that we can actually justify whatever. I don't know if it's saying, but I just wanted to mention it.
No, it's true. I mean, there are many borders serve a purpose, also a political purpose for certain dictators or politicians. So I wanted to go back to the case for open borders, because we talk a lot about the sad situation we're into, but there is hope. There are many people advocating for open borders. And I think I
actually have a t-shirt that says open borders.
And I found two main arguments to justify open borders. And one is, for me, the one that I prefer, the ethical choice, which means we live in a planet that is interconnected. We have the technology to move around. We have the resources to move around. Who am I to prevent people from settling in a territory? Why, if I'm born in a certain territory or if I can live in a certain territory, my life is so much better than if I were not allowed. And for me, so there is an ethical choice that humankind has to take at a certain point in saying, okay, we stop preventing people from moving. There is not ethical justification. It's a human right to have access to opportunities, to live with the fuck you want, and no one should prevent me from doing so.
I mean, and your ethical choice is not only about opportunities, and so obviously you should prioritize people that need to move for their lives to find a safe haven for opportunities and so on. But apart from this, like, again, we share one planet. We literally share the resources and so on. How can anyone tell someone else you stay in this piece of land, whether it's the piece of land with the highest amount of opportunities and freedom?
Yeah.
Like, and this is where you belong. This is so weird. Like, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Borders, countries, whatever. We created at a moment where you couldn't just travel the world like this, where you didn't have all of this. It makes no sense. So ethically, let people be wherever they want. Like, there's also this argument.
And also without going to the topic of taxation, social benefit, but just the idea of me moving. If I want to spend a month somewhere, I should be allowed to do so.
All my entire life.
And the other one is an economic argument that's been like proved multiple times by anyone, is that wherever you have more immigration, you have more jobs, you have better economic growth, you have more diversity in your economy. especially for countries, normally wealthy countries where people want to move to, where normally there's a very low birth rate and very slow growth in the population. So it's convenient for people. If people could move beyond racism and the fear of diversity, xenophobia, and so on, it would be very convenient. I mean, again, we talk about Italy at the beginning. Italy is a country where basically there are no more young people. Like, I'm simplifying, but the birth rate is well below the substitution rate. We are actually becoming older and older, and so having young migrants, whoever they are, where they come from, is very, very useful for the country, and same many other places. And so the fact that we're not doing that out of whatever spite, racism, xenophobia is very counterproductive, and will actually condemn countries like Italy to irrelevance and slow disappearing.
And again, because for me, all of those arguments are so logical. It's like, we teach you in kindergarten, be kind to others, don't let others die, basically. Yeah, we do it through borders. Let's talk about this. Like, don't we also teach you in kindergarten that you should try to speak to people that think differently? Because it will enlarge your mind and it's good for you. Well, be with people and live with people that are different, come from different places, have different stories. It will just be better overall for your culture. You'll be less of a shit individual, and the country will do better overall.
I fully agree. I saw like it's ethically is convenient. So why is not happening? And I think that why it's not happening is related, obviously, to the same existence of nation states. So the fact that we have nation states is preventing people from fully move, and because of racism and xenophobia. And it's very important to understand that, because if you think that it's good to have tough borders, you have to understand why you're saying this. It's not good to have tough borders. If you think so, it's because you still have some inherent racism or xenophobia.
I think there's a huge simplification in what you're saying right now.
For sure.
Which is you forgetting an argument that for me is real, and I advocate for open borders, which is, no, it's resources. It's scarce resources. So unless you have a global system whereby you can collect global tax, you can deliver services from a global level in an equitable way across the planet, open borders will put a strain on certain countries. And this is undoable on the short term. You have a lot of, and again, by the way, open borders for refugees and so on right now, yes. On the long term, I'm open borders for everyone. Let's do it. But what I'm saying in the shorter term is, unless you create this global system of governance that we want to create, that is capable and has the power to administer some basic services and so on, you will have countries where already some people, including migrants, including refugees, don't have access to housing, and that will have even less. You will have less services and so on. Whereas with a global taxation service, you can redirect this when it's most needed based on the amount of population and so on and so forth.
I fully agree. I was just talking about something even simpler. So not relocation, and which would require a lot of different systems to be in place, but simply the ability, if I'm Somalian, to go and visit the US.
I mean, like, open borders means like you do what the fuck you want.
I would love to see this happening, and I'm sure that we can make it happen. And I fully agree that to have a fully open border system, you need to have global systems in place, because if not, obviously the situation will be unsustainable from a social net point of view and so on. But what I was actually saying is also, let's start simple. Let's just allow people to travel without visas, or without being...
Or don't let people die in the Mediterranean.
Or not let people die in the Mediterranean. Or without the fear of being sent back from a border. Let's just do that. And I think it would be already like 50% of what is needed to open up people's mind and understand that if you are Somalian and you want to go to the US, you are not a threat. And thinking that Somalia is a threat is a deeply racist and horrible way to think. And this being enshrined in a public policy of a massive country, it's a shame. Like in 100 years, in 200 years, people will look back and think like, were they crazy? Were they completely lost? And I think we are.
Definitely.
Colombe, we were pointing at a comment.
Scrappy says people don't go outside of their own bubbles. If you want to combat xenophobia, just read, talk, and travel. Yeah, but again, to travel, one, you need money and a passport to be able to go around borders, which not everyone can do because of second-class passports, citizens, and so on, as considered by the current world order. So I'm not, by the way, advocating for open borders for people to break out of their bubbles. I think we are all in one bubble or another. I'm saying it's the right thing to do, and it makes no sense not to have open borders. And also, we would all beneficiate from being with people that are different from us. You do so by being in schools with people that think differently. And when you go to middle school or whatever, you're confronted with people that are different, and it's good. It's good that you don't stay only in your family bubble and so on. So you are put in another bubble, sure. But still, it enlarges it. So the more diversity, the more differences and so on, the better you'll be equipped to understand the world, the less of a shit individual you'll probably be, and so on and so forth.
I fully agree. We agree too much, Colombe. We should disagree. Do you want to tell us before we close the live about any experience you might have had at borders that kind of like left you a sign or anything? There is nothing that you can think of.
No,
or
what
like
I was
scene that you have seen.
What I was saying is like when you take the Eurostar from Paris to London and you see in Calais those lines of barbed wire, and it's not just one, it's 5, 6, like literally you're in the train and it feels like you're entering the Hunger Games, and you see the different districts lines.
Yeah,
it's so weird. Like you see a first barbed wire super tall with metal and so on, and you're like, whoa, that's weird. At first, the first time you do it, you're like, probably there's been some accidents that want to avoid people from passing here. Then another one, like 15 minutes after, then another one, and so on. It's insane. It's actually like it looks like a dystopian reality. And you see that all over. I haven't seen it, but if you look at, I forgot how it's named. Omis coffee is from Spain, so you might be able to tell me. That piece of Spanish land that is on the African continent.
Is it Medina?
Medina. I forgot. Bordering Morocco.
Melilla. Yeah, Melilla.
Bordering Morocco, where there was just a report that came out, like migrants were trying to pass over the fence and so on, and yeah, Ceuta and Melilla, and were literally like beaten up. Some people were disappeared, some people died, and so on by border forces. Like it's crazy shit.
Yeah.
I'm seeing another comment. I'm thinking, for example, of the case of many Western Sahara people here in Spain who are stateless and need to apply for stateless status. We live this reality every day, but we don't care. Yeah, I completely agree.
How many people are stateless in the world, Colombe? I'm asking Colombe because she actually studied all of this, but she might not remember.
It was, unfortunately, a long time ago, stateless, and I hate to give wrong numbers. In the world, 10 million people.
10 million.
No, that's 2014. That's definitely more today.
12 million in 2018.
Stateless people. So those are people that don't have a nationality or a passport, which means that everything becomes incredibly difficult. You can't enroll your children in schools a lot of the time. You don't have access to services. You don't have access to your residency and so on.
It's crazy. And what happened to these people? Do they normally get another passport?
So normally it's illegal basically to be stateless. You cannot, under international law, a country cannot allow you to be stateless. So you have to give those people a nationality. I think the rules differ, whether it's the country in which they are or whatever. But countries just don't do it. And it's often people that are heavily discriminated against and so on and so forth. So under the radar, more victims to abuse, more likely to be victims of abuse and so on.
That's crazy. It's very crazy.
And then there's another, sorry, it's not linked to borders, but since we're talking about nationality and holding a passport and so on, there's this really other weird thing where countries want to take away the nationality of people based on their actions. So if you believe in countries and in nations, it's something that is, for me, inalienable. Is it the correct way of saying it?
Inalienable, yeah.
Great. In the sense that, like, you have it, and that's it. And then you make mistakes, you commit a crime, the criminal justice system is supposed to support you in doing better and so on. It's not what it does, but it's supposed to. France wanted to do something that other countries did, which is to pass a law to withdraw the nationalities of people that are convicted of terrorism if they have a second nationality. It's so weird again. Like, based on what you do, you are no longer, I don't know, this whole concept of nations is so weird. Like, you put it above everything else, but then it doesn't work.
I think if you think about it, all these things do not make sense. They're like, as I said before, like none of us agreed to that. And none of us, maybe I want to be stateless and I can't. Like, there are a lot of things that are very weird.
You can't because you won't have access to basic services.
Exactly. But it's crazy. It's crazy that I need to like wave a little flag all my life.
Is it time for a global citizenship?
It is. I think it really is. So I think we are done with this live about borders and related topics. I find it very interesting. I think these are actually topics that we need to really be strong on in building a global country, global platform, and go beyond national division. Tomorrow, we are going to publish our weekly show based on the lives they've done this week on YouTube, and it's going to be about the history of nations. So obviously, we're going to cover the creation of nations, borders.
Well, we don't know yet what we're going to cover.
Probably what we cover in the lives. We really hope that this is going to be a little break in our vision to create a global country.
So to recap, we want to create a global democratic governance. We think it's needed, basically a global country overcoming all of this bullshit of national division. Sorry, I'm vulgar, as you understood by now. And as a result, to communicate this idea, what we're doing is a weekly live on YouTube and Twitch on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. We're testing different times, so send us your feedback on what times are the best. And I think last week worked a bit better when it was in the middle of the day, but a bit less convenient.
Yeah.
And Thursdays, we try to record a piece of content that is like 20, 30 minutes long of higher quality, more prepared, that we put out. Those are more brainstorming sessions with whoever is following online. So tomorrow we'll put out this content. And then next week, we'll talk about the history of supranational organizations. So the idea is understand your enemy in order to be able to fight it. And to create this global governance system. So thank you so much. Please subscribe to our channels, like it, share it. We need you to make it big. Send us your feedback, ideas, comments, love. And remember, sharing is caring.
Thank you so much.